Hello, everybody. My name's James, and welcome to episode 4 of Champions Week. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by one of our patrons and our advanced tier mini league patron winner, which basically means that he's got patron free for about 2.5 years. Let me introduce you to Cole Bonzer. How are you, Cole?
Hello, James. Yep, doing well. Doing well.
Good man. Many people probably may not know you. I know you're well known, obviously, within our Patreon and our Slack community, but just tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about yourself, if you can.
I started playing FPL in 1819. But I knew nothing about the game before that, but yeah, I've been like literally nothing at all. And so I became a patron, I think, at the end of the 2021 season. I got hooked on then, and my start into the game is a little interesting because my partner's English, and so I started, right around the World Cup in 2018. Was seeing some tweets and on social media of it's coming home, and I was like, I wonder what that is.
It was a load of deluded English people is what it was.
Right, exactly. And so I was like, I'll check in, see what this is about. And I remember, I think the first game I ever watched was that second group game, which would have been what I think it was Panama.
For England, right? England, Panama,
yeah, Panama. I remember watching that
hat-trick of 2 penalties and one completely fortuitous back heel. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That would have been the first game I ever watched. I had no idea who anyone was at that point.
So what you're telling me is England Panama in the 2018 World Cup was the first football match, or do I need to say soccer at this stage? The first
football... No, I'm all in football. Yep.
Yes, good man. The first football match you ever watched was England Panama in 2018.
Correct.
Prompted by searching Twitter and being interested in it's coming
basically
home.
It was incredible. Basically, yeah, like her friends were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll watch this. I want to be invested in the in things that they're interested in, and so I checked it out. Yeah.
So and the rest football essentially is kind of still brand new. You're in your infancy basically as a football follower and a football fan.
Absolutely.
So I mean, look, just for the benefit of the listeners, in case you can't tell already, Cole's not like 8 or 10 years old. He's definitely a man with a beard. I can see that on YouTube. So did you follow other sports prior to football? You must have, I'm gonna guess.
Oh yeah. Like I played baseball growing up and played basketball. Those were kind of my 2 main sports. For a while I played fantasy baseball, and I still do. And I, of course, because fantasy football, the American football is so popular, and I played that as well. So yeah, I'm definitely not new. It wasn't new to fantasy sports in general.
So it's interesting. So you had an idea of how fantasy sports worked, but not so much an idea of football. That's a really interesting story. Is hockey one of the fantasy games you play?
No, not hockey. No.
Oh my gosh. Neil Grover, our Bournemouth correspondent, if you're listening, sorry. But if anybody's interested in fantasy hockey, can they at AFCBNG? Apparently it's the most complicated fantasy game on earth. For those who love the statistics and like their hockey, get in touch with him. AFCBNG, our Bournemouth correspondent. But you didn't play that. So what, American football, baseball, and what, basketball?
Yeah, I played a little bit of the fantasy basketball, but that wasn't a main one, really.
I wouldn't have the foggiest clue how many players play those type of games or what success looks like in those games.
Yeah, because it's basically just mini league based, because it's more like the draft version of this game, where like you just get a group and only one person owns a particular player. And so there's not it can't be this global, I am the best at this game, or, like I had the best season because not everyone can have the same players.
Do you play draft FPL now?
I didn't really play it last season. I kind of did it very, very casually the first 2 seasons, but not really. No.
It's interesting then, although you've got fantasy experience, actually the format of FPL very different to any fantasy you'd have played before, in the sense that you and 60% of the rest of the game own Mo Salah, for example, as and when you do. So how was that as a change in mindset for you starting out with fantasy football?
I honestly, I loved it. And it was just different enough. And it was part of what I didn't like about those fantasy other sports, is that like when you drafted players in the beginning, you could get just unlucky and just like, oh, your first 2 picks, they both got hurt and they're out for the season. And then you're just done and there's nothing you can do about it. And especially in those, fantasy like football, where it's so physical, it's just like, it's so hard. It was so hard to consistently do well. And I that was one of the problems I had and why I don't play it still. So it took the parts of fantasy sports that I liked a lot and turned them way up, and just like, oh, I can change completely everyone anytime when if I see something, I can just change it. I loved it basically.
So you started FPL, I'm going to say 18-19. Have I got this right?
18-19.
Your first finish as a complete novice, 50,000.
Yes.
Did that feel normal to you?
It was, I knew at the time, I was like, wow, this is way better than a lot of people would like think I would do. But yeah, that first season, because I was so fully invested at that point that I believe, if my memory is correct, I think I watched every single game in that season. And I think I ended up, like, the first time I missed a game, like where I didn't watch it through the midweek, was like game week 28. 29.
So were you watching games back? So obviously Cole's in America and you've got access to all 380 Premier League games. What are you doing at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, which I'm going to guess is 10 a.m. your time, I think? Are you watching 4 or 5 games at the same time? Or are you watching one and then watching all the others back?
I was doing that. Yes.
Oh, wow. So you've been sacked.
1-1-1. Yeah. And then, exactly. And then,
Are you avoiding the scores? Is that something easy to do? Or because when I've had dodgy, illegal NBC streams in the past, you normally get the score updates from the other games.
Exactly. Yeah. I started avoiding scores this season. I never used to.
Okay.
But yeah, and it was helpful at the time when I started. I could watch every single game and I had the time to consistently keep those games, to watch, because it's, in the end, it's like there's 5 live games that you could watch, 5 or 6 maybe.
Yeah.
So you have to have the time to watch 4, 2-hour games basically after that, and not burn yourself out every single week. And so I had the time to spread it out, and it worked out well.
Are you all right with social life and friends and everything's cushy?
Yeah. Exactly.
Just checking. I mean, I did it
out all the time, with people, so it works for me. I like it.
Good. The COVID season, as in the whole COVID season 2021, when every game kicked off at a different time, I think I watched around about 365 of the 380 games in their entirety. And it was only like, when I say that as well, I only watched one on the final day of the season. And I think I watched 4 or 5 in game week 37. Prior to that, I'd watched nearly every single game from game week 1 to game week 36. I'm not sure I could do that again. With the games kicking off at the same time. It's much harder when you're watching a game back and you know the outcome. You can obviously, even from a fantasy perspective, I know FPL General talks about this a lot. He likes to do that. Watch games back with a prior knowledge. So you're not getting distracted by the fantasy bias of, oh, I want my player to
Mm-hmm.
score. He's actually watching, he describes it as cold. He's watching a game back cold. So he can see things that perhaps he wouldn't spot when he's
Yeah.
watching a game live. But that's not quite the case of what you were doing, because obviously you're watching games new. And I'm going to guess as well, Cole, that you're
Mm-hmm.
deciding on which team you're going to support while doing this as well.
That first season, yes. Yes, I went in.
Because
I
you've
had
got
a
nothing
couple of
prior.
friends. No. All I like, like it's funny that first season, my Game Week 1 team was, I think it was like 10 England players. And like I
Okay.
had, like Dali Alley and like that. Like I just picked people who I
You
kind
pick
of
people
knew.
you knew, right? I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then early wild card to kind of go like, okay, nope, I had no idea what I was doing, and move on from there. But and so that was part of why, because I knew like after World Cup, I'm like, oh, this is a thing I'm going to be heavily interested in going forward, and I wanted to, end up picking a team because like I had a couple friends through my partner that were just as invested, they're from there, so they,
So
they're fans as well. And so I was watching every game just to kind of to see where I landed and where I fell in love with the team.
So where did you land?
Well, I'm American, and so obviously Man City, right? Honestly, I mean, it's true, but Man City fan. But
This is
that
bearing in
it got
mind
in my
this is the season after the Centurions as well. So they, I
correct.
mean,
I know,
undoubtedly the best team
but
around at the time.
right. Well, I mean, but they weren't necessarily top of the league.
No, Liverpool
My
pushed them.
memory
That's
is
the year
my
Liverpool
memory
finished
is
on
bad.
97, I think. Yeah.
Right. Your memory, my memory is bad for that sort of thing. So I will defer. But yeah, I had actually, like, I am a Boston Red Sox fan in baseball who they own Liverpool. So I actually had an active, like, a connection to pick Liverpool. But what ended up happening was Klopp rubbed me the wrong way. And
go on, why?
I believe this is where it was something to do with, this is all that I can remember, is it was after they had played Everton and they drew.
Or was this when he was moaning about the wind or something?
Or something about the wind, but then it was complaining. There's like, oh, Everton fans are celebrating like they won the World Cup, and all they did was a draw against us. And it was just that, that petty side to him that he can have sometimes.
He's not a good loser.
Exactly. And and when I heard him say that, it was like, it's like, if that was at that point, I was like, well, I know I'm not going to be a Liverpool fan.
That's it.
And that was back then.
In defense of Jurgen Klopp, just to clarify my comment, correct. Guardiola's not a good loser. Conte's not a good loser. Arteta's definitely not a good loser. It goes on and on. And managers shouldn't necessarily be good losers. But you got rubbed up the wrong way.
I got rubbed up the
Guardiola rubbed you up the right way, did he? Or
yeah, pretty much. Honestly, like, and to this day, it's like I love listening to Pep, like in press conferences and stuff, and it's just
really FPL managers don't.
I just love hearing him talk about the game, honestly, and just like, because he's, I don't know. And then even like, although like when he does lose, it's like he basically, like, I listen to him and it's similar to the way that I see. And I mean, not to say that I look at the game the same way, but I connected with Pep more than other managers.
Seriously, was the managers a big influence in the team that you chose?
It ended up helping, and just like it ended up contributing, I should say, because I wanted to, I kind of wanted to have I wasn't looking for anything in particular. It's just I was basically just just consuming everything that I could. Watched all the games, tried to watch press conferences, looked at, a ton of, looked at the like communities on Twitter or anything social media of the fans to try to get a sense for like, okay, if I'm going to support this club, what are their fans like? Do I like them? Do I hate them? It's like, if you're going to support, one of the, Liverpool or Man United, is like sometimes their fans can be a bit, on social media, they can be a bit.
So you're also influenced by the fact that there aren't so many City fans on Twitter.
I mean,
we do joke about that. Like people were. I think the opposition of let's say the rest of the big six wouldn't be that bothered if City won the league every year. Like United would rather City won it than Liverpool, for example.
Right.
Liverpool would rather City won it than United. Arsenal probably feel similarly about City over United, for example. It's kind of a common denominator. I think one of the reasons for that is the modern social day influence of social media is that Man City fans are just not seen in the same noisy way as the other five, basically.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Like, and that's more my style. Like you'll never see me like gloat or like go, we won the league. Like, that's not me. Like
if Tottenham ever win it, mate, that will be me.
I know, right? Like there's plenty of people that are just like that, and that's not the wrong way to go about it. That's just not me. Like I'm not that type of, like, I will celebrate for myself, and like with other City fans, I would never like go out and go ha like to anyone. Like I've never sent a message to any of my friends on the final day like, we won the league. You're like, yes, yeah. Like that's just not who I am. So that does probably contribute into it. Yeah. And I found a little group of City fans, and it kind of just clicked, and the rest is.
Do you have like a local supporters group?
No, it's not local. No, it's just online. And I knew that going in is that it was going to have to be online, because there are some, like, I think there's one bar that does like some Premier League stuff in the morning, I think, but I've never been, because I don't want to get up and drive in 45 minutes. And when I'm getting up at 4:30 already, I don't want to get up even earlier to drive somewhere and watch a game. It's like,
no, the equivalent time for me is me getting home from the pub rather than going to the pub. Yeah, I completely get that. We'll come back on to Manchester City, because I do want to get your opinion on some of their assets towards the end as well. But after that great first FPL season, 50k, complete novice, brilliant finish. The following season, are you then looking at going, oh, I don't know what I'm doing? You finished at 395k, which is a sort of finish I'm not going to shoot anybody down for. I finished basically there 2 seasons ago, but you've obviously dropped 350k basically from your first finish. Are you thinking, oh shit, this isn't as easy as I thought, or were there things that went differently?
Yeah, so obviously like that first season, like out of the 380 games I watched, in the end probably 360, 300, I watched a ton of those games, right? And then I ended up starting a job during that season, like 6 weeks in or something, that took up quite a bit of time for me. And all of a sudden, those, like I said, midweek games, I could maybe watch 2. Like I could watch City and maybe one other, and that was it. And at that point, I had thought that I could replace watching the games with looking at some stats. And it's because, honestly, I kind of had to, because I couldn't watch in the same way that I could the first season. And it just really didn't work out that well. I just remember Tammy Abraham burning me more times in that season than I kept going back.
Everybody's got stories of being burnt by Chelsea forwards, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, that whole season, I could not watch nearly as many games as I had the previous season. It was significantly less. And
so you think, to jump ahead, are you watching more games again now?
Yes.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, because your third and fourth seasons, which we come on to, are also unbelievable finishes. You actually feel that one season where you didn't get to view games personally yourself had a major bearing on your overall rank. Because I've always, and feel free absolutely to correct me, I've always had the impression that American fantasy football based games are heavily stats important. Would that be fair or not?
Like the other games, like baseball and like baseball, it's the games that I play, like it's just stats. Like it's not like win or anything. It's basically just the different types of stats.
Someone throws a ball and someone hits it, right? It's a little different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's different, but yeah, it's like that. It's just stats. And so it's and not quite points based, like it's just counting statistics up, right? And so it is different, but yeah, and like looking back at my 4 seasons, it's like obviously the seasons can go one way or another without, you could do the same thing 4 seasons and get wildly different results, right? But that season, that what is clear looking back is I watched way less games that season, probably 60 to 80 fewer games that season than the other 4 seasons, right? And so like obviously, and then the subsequent seasons I had time to watch.
So most of your decisions, FPL related, based on what you say. Did that experience make you want to kind of bin off stats, or do you use a combination of both?
It's a combination, and that's a great question, because although I don't even really see it as one or the other, or even a combination, I feel like going off stats is just a result. I mean, like when you think about it, it's like it's just a result of what you see and what happens, right? So like if you watch a game and you see, and you're just watching it and you go, oh, Kane had a ton of shots and a ton of great opportunities that game, because you could see it, right? You were watching it happen and you that. But then and then you go look at the stats and like, oh yeah, he did, right? It's almost a replacement. In my mind, it can almost be a replacement to watching it, which is sometimes where I caused myself to get burned that one season, where I could almost think like, oh well, I don't have to watch everything if I have these stats to look at, right? Where sometimes for me, and there's a lot of noise with stats, like there's so many different stats, but like how many of them actually matter, that's something that I've looked at on my own. It's just like I've kind of tried to break it down into, it's just like, especially after that second season, I started doing this. It's like I had started looking at, okay, well, what gets the most points in FPL? Scoring a goal. Okay, so and it's like, yeah, assists are great. They're 3 points, not 5, right? And so, and I just started looking at goals a lot more, and then tried to look at stats and see, look at where, I've done this last couple seasons where I look at the top 10 midfielders and then look at the stats for the whole season and see which statistic tends to reflect the finish of the players, right?
So you're still very much using stats.
I am, but it's what I'm trying to do is
you're putting your own slant on it, which is okay.
Yeah, but and then the goal of that is to find 1 or 2 things to look at, maybe 3 or 4 if it's close.
Yeah, but listen, I think it can also be overload, right? If you're looking,
absolutely,
if you're hypothetically looking at a Saka versus Kulusevski comparison, for example, if you're looking at every single metric, then no, it's just gonna blur your lines, because some Saka will be better and some Kulusevski will be better, for example. So I like your style in terms of condensing the information that you're taking on. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so for instance, I tend to look at big chances and shots in the box. those are the main two that I'll look at.
Yep.
But I won't look at them. I won't like go in game week 10 or whatever and go look and go, oh, who's at the top? Oh, I don't have them. Oh, I'll go bring them in. I won't do that. But it's more like I just check in and I let it inform my eye watching the game, rather than just looking at that and trying to make decisions based off of the statistics. I try to let it inform me watching the game.
Yeah, an added dimension to what you've already seen with your eyes, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think overall for fantasy managers, listen, it's not a right or wrong when we know we hear what a grass versus analytics, for want of a better term. So people who only use the eye test, if it works for you, great. People who only use the stats, if it works for you, great. I kind of dislike the debate, to be totally honest. But I think most people who do well at the game have a slant like yours, which is okay. Yeah, you're let's say 70% with your eye, then using the statistics to add on to what you watch, I think is kind of the ideal. I'm not saying it's 70% eye, 30% stats, but some sort of balance is generally where the best fantasy managers will do, I find. Which is why I don't do great, because I'm lazy with stats a lot of the time.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, it's tough because there's so many. And for a lot of people, like, it's what ones do you look at? What ones do you don't? And like, for, sometimes sometimes people get to looking at, either the wrong ones, or they might be looking at a stat for this versus like stat for defenders versus midfielders. And, there's a lot out there. And so it can be, that's why I called it noise, because it's like, it's almost too much sometimes to look at.
And that's relatable to so many things, right? I mean, you could even flip it to say, do you, with respect, do you need to watch with the fixtures that the two clubs have? Do you need to watch Bournemouth and Crystal Palace closely in the first couple of weeks when you've almost got no interest in their assets? Probably, maybe not. So it can flip the other way with that as well, I think.
Agreed.
Obviously, the following year, 2021, you shot back up to 35k overall, and then last year you shot up to just outside the top 1,000 as a final finish, 2,094, I think, which is an extraordinary finish. It also means in your 4 seasons of FPL, you've got essentially 3 out of 4 top 50k finishes, despite starting as a novice, basically. And I've admitted there were problems with your second season. Everyone's got the work or kid excuse or something when they have a bad season.
Exactly.
Mine and Suj is just being shit, basically. But therefore, your FPL history from starting new, behind of a lot of people have obviously got prior knowledge, historical as well to yourself, is very, very consistent. And something that I wanted to talk about stands out massively from your history last season specifically. You only had 10 red arrows in the whole season. And he did say to me, yeah, but James, I started shit. Yeah, but you weren't like at 5 million in game week 10 or anything. You had steady increases all throughout the season. You didn't have like Andy we spoke to on Tuesday's episode, where he was like 1k, went to 30k, went back to 1k. And even obviously Jamie, who won it, went from sort of 30th back to 1,000 and then back to first again. Your history's got nothing like that. Obviously, you've had small dips. It's just consistent rise, like almost like you're chipping away all season. Is there something behind that strategically for you?
Especially last season, I would say that around about a third of the way, halfway through the season, I kind of found out, it kind of clicked something that was going to work for me as far as doing better in the game, which it kind of comes back to watching. I decided to actively watch more games. And so that's kind of what came out of that was, for me, like with like what you said about FPL general, watching games when you knew the results, and it got to a point where that wasn't working for me. I couldn't focus enough on what was happening. because I knew it was going to happen. I knew like, oh, so and so is going to score in the 50th minute. I already know that's happening, and so I would end up looking at my phone during a game, and then it's pointless. Like if you're not watching with, if you're not invested in what you're watching, it's not going to work. And so I started while I was at work, not looking at anything, because of course, like I'm working 7:30 to 4:30, and when games are happening midweek, they're happening exactly during the middle of when I'm working because of the time difference. And so before I was just checking, oh, how's my team doing throughout the day on that lunch? But I decided not to do that, and then wait till I got home and watched 1 or 2 games if I had time when I got home. And I started doing a lot better. And just see, and that's what I'm thinking is just like, for me, it's watching the games helps a lot more for me. And I think part of that is, it's going to sound weird, but it's like, because a lot of what I look for as well is players having like momentum, like in confidence and momentum in themselves. Form, is that what you said?
Yeah, form.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And so like, and I just watched a video actually with Marcus Rashford. He was talking about this with LeBron James. Actually, I watched it the other day where he was talking about like being in the zone and like as a player, and just like you don't know it's happening until it just is, but like people can see it when it's happening. It's very clear, and that's because not all goals are like a player being in the zone or in form, because that will come and go, right? So like obviously you think like Son, like the last third of the season, right? Like he was just, it was just clicking, and just like he could do no wrong, right? Like if he had a good chance, ball was going in the net.
Oh, right? I saw him miss a few, mate. But no, he's so good in front of goal generally.
Yeah, which I get jealous of, being, having watched some of the City players. Kind of Chelsea fans will get to know Raheem Sterling sometimes.
We'll come back on to.
I know, but anyway, and so I think trying to identify those players that are where the decision making, like watching their decision making, not necessarily like, oh yeah, like, oh, Mo Salah's, he's finding the top corner every time. That's awesome. That's great. But then it's not always about shooting. It's about when is he making the right decision, what I feel like is the right decision, which of course, who knows if that actually is true. But yeah, and just like, because sometimes players just will be making, you just watch a game and you're like, no, they're just off it. They're not making the right decisions. And what I find is like that it comes in waves, right? Like they sometimes are making the right decision, sometimes not. And I will try to jump on anyone that, like, human Son, that and he's making good decisions. It's like, oh, okay, boom, like right on, Kevin De Bruyne, he's really making good decisions. I can see that. Boom, like jump on that, and I'll come off just as quickly if they're looking like they're not, if they're not feeling confident, or they're making the wrong pass or waiting so long, I'll come right off. And so there is
definitely a theme of people who finished the season really well not having Mo Salah. And you captained him a lot in the first half of the season. So you didn't have the FOMOs of something we obviously speak about a lot. You didn't have that FOMO in the second half of the season of, oh, he's done great for me, or when I haven't captained him, he's burnt me. I mean, you captained him at Manchester United away, for example, when he had his big haul and stuff. You were consistently going with him over that period, but then didn't necessarily, you still, I think you triple captained him, didn't you, in the Leeds Norwich double? But otherwise, it was like he was back in, and then you jump back off him again quite quickly for that running, because there's a couple of things that's really interesting as well. So a lot of people say, yeah, okay, yeah, you did have let's say a very average rank to start with. I mean, the only real dip you had was sort of game week 13 to game week 16, where you'd been at 332k, and then you had 3 bad weeks, dropped to 736k. I think it's really important to highlight to people that you were at 736k at game week 16 and still finished at 2k. So, don't lose hope is what I'd say to people.
Yeah.
And again, you didn't have what Jamie had. The winner was he had some astonishingly good weeks where he jumped unbelievably. Yours, as I said, was chipping away. To the point, even if I look at where you used your chips, and this is what's quite different to Jamie and actually also with Andy, who finished well, was they had all the chips left from sort of game week 30 onwards. You didn't. You only had one free hit left from game week 31 onwards. Wildcard's already been used. You used that in game week 27, straight after the Salah triple captain. You wildcarded 27 to bench boost 28. Used a free hit during FA Cup quarter-final weekend, game week 30, which went quite well for you. And I think I know that because I can see -3 on your bench, which tells me you benched Raul Jimenez specifically and got 84 points that week. But at game week 30, with only the free hit left, you're at 57k. And you've got all these other people with chips still active around you. And yet you have jumped from 57k to 2k and only one red arrow in that time, which was game week 33, where there was a lot of Ronaldo Fernandez free hits knocking about and stuff like that.
Right.
How with no chips did you manage to fight against everybody else? Because in game week 36, you didn't use a chip. And despite being at 19k going into the game week, you jumped to 5,875. So you still had that big jump at the end. And the biggest jump was game week 36, where there's triple captaincies, De Bruyne, etc., bench boost knocking about. You didn't have that and still did really well. Primarily, I think, because you did still captain Kevin De Bruyne and had Heung-min Son as well. It's the same narrative of that end bit, which of course doesn't mean that's what everybody should do next year, because if Mo Salah does great for 20 game weeks next year, doesn't mean he's not going to do so great in the last 20. He's got no AFCON this year and things like that might be an influence. Diaz coming in January, we don't know how much of an impact that potentially had as well in terms of his minutes towards the end of the season as well. How did you do it? Was it essentially that, going against players at the end?
Kind of, yeah. I'm always and like you talk about chips as well. Like I will always look at what everyone is doing and try to see if there's a slightly different way to go about it to kind of get a plus side to it, and then also a kind of cover off what is happening with most people anyway. And then like other people have, like, I know I listen to Jimmy, it's about picking your battles, right? That's like, you got to go like, well, if I go without Salah, I can, have these two people in that I know are doing well, and I'll go with that, right? And so, and I know it's like, but the other thing that happened that helped a lot was I picked captains. Well, my captaincy, I shouldn't say I picked good captains. My captaincy worked out very well throughout the season. Really, I think I looked yesterday and I had 7 blanks as captains, and I was just looking back, I was like, is that really? I think it was 7 times my captain blanked. So I won't do that good again. That's for sure. But
I do think there's a narrative behind a lot of people last year was sort of 28. I mean, you're saying what, 31 winning captains, if you will. I think most people were sort of between 28, 30 or so. So a lot of people, partly because of Salah in the first half as well, where he was returning, which helps every week. But then those who deviated with like Son 35, De Bruyne 36, again Son 38 as well at the end.
Had all those.
Richarlison 37, I bet.
No, I think I went Vardy.
Oh, just as good. Vardy. Near enough, mate.
I know, right? And I had Richarlison also. And I had the same one that Jamie had, which was captained De Bruyne in whatever week that was.
And you had Son as vice.
And I had Son vice captain, had that as well. So plenty of fortune in the captaincy. But yeah. But that helped. And just picking right captain Yeah, just when you feel like you think something has worked for you and you think you have something figured out, it'll change. So it's not going to take anything for granted going into the future season. But it kind of felt like I had that working out the last season, which clearly it helps a ton as far as overall rank goes.
Yeah, sure. I'm interested to know in that final stretch. I'm interested to know what role mini leagues played in the part of the end as well, because one of the reasons you're sitting here now is because you won our advanced tier mini league. Now we've got, and I'm going to plug Patreon a little bit here. We've got a prize pool for advanced tier patrons of £1,000 across the season in manager of the month, first, second, third prizes, and we have £500 prize pot for intermediate tier patrons as well. The winner of the advanced tier mini league, which you've got, is £350, which is why I say you've basically got Patreon free for the next 2.5 years. Are you in the running? Are you thinking I need overall rank? Or because where you were going into game week 36, I'm presuming you weren't first. So were you aiming, thinking it's 350 quid at the end for me there? Was that part you're thinking?
Oh, that was, I was looking at the advanced tier, like top of the mini league, only at the very, because like I went from, because I wasn't that close up until basically game, I think 37, I shot up with my free hit, where that's when I got like, oh, I'm actually kind of close. So I was really only looking at being top for about a week, for I think it was just the one game week. And but yeah, and then there was also someone in there that what ended up not being eligible because I think they joined after the game week 8 deadline to win it. And so I was in there thinking like, oh, like, you know, I had to kind of, I think I was third and I was like, you know, 2 points or 5 points. I don't know. I was close enough to the second place. I was like, oh, I could probably catch him, but I might not be able to catch both of them. But, and so, you know, game week 38 came and went, and I was like, and I saw that I was second, and I was like, I'm pretty close. And I was, what was bugging me was the manager of the months kept, like these months that kept rolling by, and I think I was like top 5.
You kept missing it.
I was like top 5 every month, going like from like January, February. It was just like top 5. I was just like, God, dang, I just can't win it. And so, but yeah, and then so obviously that contributes to being near the top at the end. And so
Cole didn't know that he'd won it till I think you were listening to the Patreon podcast when I said you'd won it. I think you didn't know before that.
I had no idea.
Because someone was ahead of you in the league, but they joined after. We have a cut-off, so people can't join in January and go top of the league, etc., and all that kind of thing. The person who was top had joined after. We have a game week 8 cut-off, and I think it'll be the same this year, by the way, because that's the international break, so that'll probably be our cut-off again. So you didn't know till I told you. What was your reaction at that point?
I turned on the podcast as I am eating breakfast at 6 a.m, ready to go to work, you know, tired, you know, just woke up, and I'm listening, and you announce it like 4 minutes in, you know, like, Cole Bonzer won the adventure, and I'm like, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, I just got like so excited that I was like, I had no idea, and I was just, it, you know, made my morning, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I guess.
Nice one. No, that's great to hear. There's a more boring story about how we struggled to get the money transferred to Cole in America, but we haven't. Oh gosh,
yeah,
that's more boring.
We got that.
It's done. He's got his money.
Yep.
That's really interesting. You also threw me, but I've now got this vision of you getting ready, eating your cereal, and listening to me swear at 6 o'clock in the morning as part of your routine
every morning. Yeah,
it's a little bit scary. Brilliant. No, that's such a cool story. Before we let you go, a couple of thoughts on a few things for this coming season.
Absolutely.
You mentioned Raheem Sterling. Divides opinion. Brilliant and frustrating, often in the same game quite often. What's your thoughts on him at Chelsea? Because he's likely to be the man now, which has been part of his problem at City.
Yeah.
10 million. It's decent, isn't it?
It's not bad. Absolutely. And so, 10 million at City, he really wasn't getting that time, was he? Consistently throughout the season. And so at Chelsea, you'd think that he would. You'd think so. And so but yeah, he's always like there was a couple times during this last season where it looked like he was getting time when I jumped on him, and it worked out for me. And so I think that if it's with Chelsea, if there's more opportunities for that to happen where he's a clear option, I think it could be quite good to go with him at times. For me, he's not quite the player to stick with for 10, 12, 14 game weeks in a row. He's more of a, oh, he's looking good, let's go get on that real quick and then come off. But yeah, I think he could do pretty well. I'm thinking
he's obviously coming into people's thoughts more and more, because I think, like you said, at City he was due to drop. He's obviously had the drop now. The transfer's gone through. But I think there's more and more people looking at it going, yeah, do you know what, he is likely to be the biggest goal scoring threat from Chelsea now. He's clearly moved because for the last 18 months he's been unhappy with the amount of starts he's getting, and if you can force him in, obviously a little bit like what you said, if you are unhappy with it, you can come down to Bowen switching fixtures in game week 7 and shove the funds around or something like that. And it's something I definitely want to have a look at over the next week or so, is forcing him in. But I think if I force him in, I still want two other big hitters as captaincy ahead of him, which can make the rest of the squad look a little bit disjointed. And with that in mind, I feel like one of them's got to be a Manchester City premium. Where do you stand on City assets at the moment? And first, do you have a De Bruyne versus Haaland preference?
I am on Haaland personally, and that is, it's not really my, like how I played fantasy last season. I didn't really go with a premium forward after like game week 10 or 12 often at all. I went with cheaper forwards and then big midfield. So it's kind of against what I have been doing to go with Haaland, but it's kind of like, it's like,
it's that, isn't it?
You have to just, I feel like I just have to start there and see how it goes. And so, yeah. And then De Bruyne at 12 is just, it's just a bit too much. And like with Son being the exact same price right there. And I like having, having one in one, like I wouldn't want to go, both for sure. And then, yeah, for me, I'm on Son and Haaland right now. And that as kind of my premiums.
So am I.
Yeah, I know. No Salah.
And it feels wrong, and I'm not going to cover stuff we've already spoke about on the podcast this week, but it's interesting that it's a growing, I don't want to say a movement, I just think it's a growing conclusion, and nobody doesn't want Mo Salah in their team. Nobody thinks, oh, Mo Salah's shit. I think we all think Mo Salah will probably be the highest scoring player again, as he should be, as the highest priced player in the game. But it's not as straightforward as that, is it? And that's what a lot of people are coming to the conclusion on. The interest in and I'm not saying I'm going to go with it, and Cole's not committing to it either, but at the moment you're saying Haaland, Son. What are you saying for the rest of the City guys? Cancelo in?
Cancelo is in for me at the moment, and then as of right now, so is Mahrez.
Interesting.
I have kind of, even in the in the Slack, I've told people that I might avoid at first and then jump on someone who looks like they're going to get more time, because between like Mahrez, Foden, Grealish, and De Bruyne, there's, with Haaland up front, there's less spots from the play, right? And so we're gonna have to see, is Pep gonna favor, like, is someone gonna get 8-9 starts? Like, is Mahrez gonna start 8-9 times out of 10 on the right, and then Foden and Jack kind of take left wing?
I really fancy Grealish to have a good season. I've said that a number of times over the last few months.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of his at City. I think this whole season, I think he had a great first season, and I think he'll do very well this season. But it's just, I just have this thing where it's like, I think if Mahrez is on the right, and where's Foden going to play is my big thing. Is like Pep is clearly shown, like, rightly so, that he wants to play Foden, or like that he will find a place for him. And that's why, like, oh yeah, he played him through the middle so often last season, is, he was finding a place for him, right? And so I'm just a little wary of, is he just going to go Foden left, Mahrez right a lot of games, and then Jack will sub? I don't know. But until that happens, it's the only thing I'm thinking is I think Mahrez is just a bit more assured, just a little bit more assured of starts.
Yeah, is that based on the fact, obviously, Foden's not gone on tour to America? Do you feel that's given him the edge now?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Mahrez being, yeah, I think so. And then it just comes with like having, like, that's his position, whereas Foden, it's more like he'll go anywhere kind of along.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Mahrez will 90% of the time play on the right. Foden, it's less obvious.
Right. Yeah. And so, and like, I am hoping eventually that he might even move back into midfield eventually. That's my hope as a City fan. I think that's where because I want him on the ball.
Yeah, I'd love to see him play centrally for England. Yeah, absolutely.
I would. Yeah, me as well. And then it's like, with him, like, I don't know if it would quite work all the time with like him and De Bruyne in midfield. Like, that would be absurd in some games, but then it would be too much, too attacking in other games. So I don't know. I don't think he'd do that, especially with Bernardo still there. But anyway, it's a tough one to think about. Like, and I'm definitely not fully convinced on Mahrez at all. But at the moment, I wanted to have a like a surefire, like, great asset in midfield that's not heavily owned, which that does come into, like, I do want to try to find ways to be different
it's so
ways
difficult
like that
to pick the City one as well, because as soon as you think you've got it as well, Pep will change the game with his selection, or we think we've got it, so we could have, like, I don't know, let's say Mahrez doesn't play at West Ham, and I can see it then going into Bournemouth. Mahrez is definitely going to play against Bournemouth, because we've had this before, and then he doesn't again, for example.
Yeah.
Or Mahrez does great against West Ham. Okay, so he's in the team. Foden will come back in against Bournemouth. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it always feels like that. Like Mahrez particularly,
yes.
If you knew he was going to play every week, it's not even really anything to think about at that sort of price. But it's just never that obvious, is it?
No, and that's why part of it kind of helps being a City fan, and that Pep got a little bit more predictable with who he plays last season. It kind of was just more like, if you're in form, like, you'll continue to play. Like, if you're doing well, you continue to play. So it kind of helps in that way, being a City fan, is I could figure out more who was more likely to start, and go with it that way. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting in preseason Community Shields to see who's doing well, because it might be like it looks pretty clear. It might not. Who's to say? So, but yeah.
Cal,
that's where I'm.
Absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Good luck to you, your team,
your
FPL team over the next 12 months or so. Give the other advanced tier patrons a chance next year, mate. They'll very much appreciate it. Before we let you go, where can people follow you on the Bird app? I think at last look, you've got about 7 followers, so we've got to do something about that, mate.
I just cleared it all out. That's my personal Twitter account from when I was 16, and I hadn't made an FPL one or anything.
Was there incriminating stuff that you deleted it?
I have no idea, but it's gone now. And so I cleared out all my friends that follow me. It's just like, no, I'm just gonna make this my account now. And so I cleared out all my followers. So yeah, I think it's Bonzer C.
Yes, your surname and the first initial of your first name. Cal, thank you so much, and thank you for being one of our patrons. Your support is hugely appreciated, mate. Thank you. Still to come on the final episode of Champions Week tomorrow, Suvansh Singh, Planet FPL Mini League winner and second in the world overall in Fantasy Premier League last season. That will be our last episode of Champions Week tomorrow. But just leaves me to say thanks again to Cole. Be nice to each other, everyone. Stay safe, stay cool, stay hydrated. Cue music, please, man show.